There are people who figure out too late that the woman they've been dismissing is the same woman who quietly kept a lot of things running. My daughter-in-law learned that on a Sunday in May, at a restaurant she'd chosen herself, in front of a dining room full of strangers who heard every word she said. By the time the manager walked across that floor toward our table, she'd have given anything to take back what she'd said 60 seconds earlier. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Ted Corrigan. I'm 49 years old. I spent 22 years working pipelines in northern Alberta, Fort McMurray, Peace River, a winter in Fort St. John that I don't talk about anymore, until my back made the decision for both of us and I came home to Calgary for good. These days I do light property maintenance for a few landlords around Inglewood. It keeps me busy enough. It keeps me out of my wife's hair, which after 31 years of marriage, she still pretends to appreciate even when she doesn't. Joan, my wife, has been the quieter one in every room we've ever shared. That's not a knock on her. She spent 30 years as a school librarian at Parkdale Elementary, putting the right books into the right hands, at exactly the right time. And somewhere in doing that she developed the particular patience of a woman who's learned that not everything needs to be said out loud to matter. She retired early 2 springs ago, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She plants things now. She reads more than ever. She makes the best butter tarts west of Ontario, and she'll argue with you about that. She also drives the same 2011 Subaru Outback she's had since our son Lucas was finishing high school. She shops at Superstore. She clips coupons on her phone. She does not talk about money, which is something I understood about her early in our marriage and respected, because I grew up in a house where money was talked about constantly and almost never in a way that made anyone feel good. What I didn't fully understand until about 3 years into our marriage was why Joan didn't talk about it. I thought it was just who she was. It took me longer to realize it was also because she was very quietly, very carefully doing something with it. But I'll come back to that. Our son, Lucas Corrigan, 27 years old, works in commercial lending at one of the big 5 banks downtown. He's a good kid. I say that knowing he's not a kid anymore, but you don't fully stop saying it. He called us in early May to say he wanted to take us out for Mother's Day. His idea, he said. Somewhere nice. He'd make a reservation. What he didn't mention until later was that somewhere nice had actually been chosen by his wife, Petra Fenwick, 27, who'd kept her last name after the wedding because she said it was her professional identity. She works in commercial real estate. She grew up in Kelowna, the younger of 2 daughters in a family that had done well in the Okanagan wine business and wanted everyone in the general vicinity to know it. She used to laugh at my jokes when she and Lucas first started dating. She used to call Joan Sunday afternoons to ask questions about recipes. There was a version of Petra I liked quite a bit. That version had been replaced, gradually and then all at once, by a woman who measured the people around her in a way I couldn't quite name until I figured out she was doing the same math her parents did. Worth is income, contribution is visible, everything else is charity. Joan's sister, Carol Whitmore, 61, retired dental hygienist, sharper than she looks, called the Thursday before Mother's Day, and I happened to pick up. Is she excited? Carol asked. You'd think Lucas bought her a restaurant, I said. There was a brief silence on Carol's end, a specific kind of silence. Petra picked the place? She asked. Apparently. Another pause. You'll want to keep your eyes open, Ted. I told her I always did. She said that wasn't the same thing. I didn't think much of it at the time. Carol has always had particular opinions about Petra, most of them earned, if I'm honest, but I try not to borrow other people's conclusions before I've done the reading myself. Joan tried on her good blouse twice Sunday morning before we left. The deep blue one she'd bought at a boutique on 4th Street and then talked herself out of for 3 months before I told her to just get it. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, asking me if it was too much. It's exactly right, I said, and I meant it. Joan doesn't dress to be noticed. She dresses to feel like herself. And that Sunday, herself looked like a woman who'd earned a nice evening out and didn't need anyone's permission to enjoy it. The restaurant Petra had chosen was on 17th Avenue SW, a newer spot with exposed brick and a wine list in a leather folder and servers who introduced themselves like they were about to read you a short story. The kind of place where you check your collar in the truck window before you walk in, even if you already checked it at home. Lucas and Petra were already at the table when we arrived. Corner booth, good lighting, bread basket on the table with half of it already gone on Petra's side. You look amazing, Mum, Lucas said, standing up to hug Joan. He still calls her mum. Some things you don't grow out of. Petra looked up from her phone long enough to say hey and go back to scrolling. I want to be fair here. Petra wasn't always like this at tables. There was a version of her that asked questions and listened to the answers. I don't know exactly when that changed. Maybe it was the promotion she got last year. Maybe it was something in her own upbringing that I only understood much later, when I had more information. What I knew that Sunday was that Joan had been looking forward to this dinner for 2 weeks, and Petra had greeted her the way you greet a notification you've already seen. Menace came. Petra ordered first before anyone else had opened theirs. She wanted the halibut but with the sauce on the side, and she wanted to make sure the kitchen actually noted it this time. She said that last part to the server, a young woman named Jessie, maybe 23, with a constellation of freckles across her nose, and the particular calm of someone who'd learned not to take things personally on a busy Sunday. Of course, Jessie said, I'll make sure. Joan ordered the duck confit. I got the Alberta strip loin because I'm 49 years old and I've worked hard enough to eat red meat without a committee vote. Lucas ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than my first truck payment and didn't think to ask if Joan and I wanted input before he did. The conversation moved the way it does at these dinners. Lucas talked about a deal at work. Joan laughed at the right moments. Petra looked to her phone under the table with the screen brightness turned down like that made it invisible. Twice Joan tried to pull her in, asked about a colleague Petra had mentioned at Christmas, asked about the condo they'd been talking about buying. Both times Petra answered in 4 words or fewer and went back to wherever she was on that screen. This isn't what I asked for. Petra said it flatly when her halibut arrived, sauce already drizzled, like she was reading a receipt that didn't add up. I'm so sorry, Jessie said. I'll have that fixed right away. I watched Jessie's jaw tighten just slightly before she turned around. She was working Mother's Day. She had her own mother somewhere. She was being talked to like a malfunctioning appliance by a woman who couldn't be bothered to look up from a screen for the woman who raised her own husband. I ate my strip loin and let the conversation happen around me the way I usually do. I've worked camps and rigs with men who thought volume was authority, and every single one of them was wrong. I wasn't going to become a scene, but I was watching. I was doing the arithmetic. I didn't know it yet, but something else was already in motion on the other side of the kitchen door. The check arrived. Jessie set it in the middle of the table the way servers do, carefully neutral, stepping back to give the table its privacy. She was already turning to leave when Petra reached out and touched her arm. Just lightly enough to stop her. Actually, Petra said, loud enough that I heard it, loud enough that the couple at the next table went quiet. We're not covering her meal. She didn't look at Joan when she said it. She pointed at her. A quick, flat gesture, like pointing to a line on a contract that needs to be adjusted. Lucas and I are paying for ourselves. His dad can cover his own. But we didn't agree to pay for her. The duck and whatever she's been drinking, that's separate. Jessie stood completely still. I'd seen that look before on people doing very fast mental calculations about what just happened and what the manual says to do about it. Joan, Petra added, finally using her name but still talking to the server and not to my wife. We invited her, but this isn't an open tab. The table went silent the way a room goes silent when something falls and breaks, and you're not sure yet how bad the damage is. Joan looked down at her plate. I watched her hand settle around her wine glass. Not gripping it, just resting. 31 years of marriage and I can read her the way you read weather. She wasn't going to make a scene. She was deciding what she was worth, silently, in real time, while her daughter-in-law pointed at her like a billing error. I reached across and put my hand over hers. Then I looked at my son. Lucas was looking at the tablecloth. Lucas, I said it quietly. No anger in it, just his name so he'd look up. He did. You might want to think carefully about what you say next, I told him, because what you say next is going to matter for a long time. He looked at me, then he looked at his mother, then he looked at Petra, and he said nothing. I want to tell you I was surprised. I wasn't. He'd been saying nothing for about 3 years, slowly, the way a person gets used to the temperature of a room dropping degree by degree until they can't remember what warm felt like. I kept eating. Not because I didn't care, because I've been in enough tight situations to know that a man who explodes in public gives the wrong person something to use later. I was going to let this play out. I didn't know yet how it was going to play out. I just knew it wasn't going to end the way Petra expected. Jessie excused herself and walked toward the back of the restaurant. Not to the till. Toward the manager's office. Now let me tell you about Brent. Brent Halliday, 45, had been managing restaurants in Calgary for the better part of 20 years. He'd started bussing tables at a spot on MacLeod Trail when he was 17, worked through every level of front of house, and landed as general manager of this location when the ownership group expanded to 17th Avenue 4 years ago. He was good at his job in the specific way that good means in hospitality. He could read a room in 30 seconds, settle a situation in 60, and remember the name of every regular who'd sat at his tables in the past year. 3 winters ago, his daughter, Lily, 6 years old at the time, lost most of the use of her right hand in an accident. His group benefits plan was decent, as plans go, but the specialized myoelectric prosthetic the occupational therapist recommended wasn't covered by Alberta Health Services, and wasn't covered by his private plan, and cost more than Brent made in 6 months. He didn't tell his staff. He just started working doubles. He sold his truck and drove his wife's Civic. He looked into second mortgages and foundation programs and submitted applications and waited. Then a letter came from the Alberta Children's Hospital Foundation saying that an anonymous contribution had been applied to Lily's case through a donor-directed fund, and the prosthetic would be provided at no further cost to the family. Lily started therapy 6 weeks later. She started school the following September, able to button her own coat. Brent spent 2 years trying to find out who had done that. The foundation would only tell him it was anonymous and permanent. He thanked the staff member who fielded his calls so many times she started recognizing his voice. He told himself someday, somehow he'd find a way to say thank you to whoever it was. He didn't know it was Joan until that evening. Here's the thread that connected it. The previous sous chef at this restaurant, a man named Dario Mancuso, 38, originally from Medicine Hat, had done volunteer kitchen shifts for years at a community center in Forest Lawn, the same center where Joan had run a reading program 2 Saturdays a month for nearly a decade. They'd stood side by side in that kitchen more times than either could count. Dario had mentioned offhandedly to Brent, back when the foundation letter arrived, and Brent was quietly overwhelmed, that he'd heard through someone at a charity gala that the anonymous donation had been arranged by a woman named Joan Corrigan, who sat on the Children's Hospital Foundation's giving committee and had structured it specifically so no one would ever connect her name to it. Dario had moved on to another kitchen by that Mother's Day, but the connection stayed in Brent's mind the way significant things do, dormant, unresolved, waiting. When Jessie came to find him that evening, slightly wide-eyed, and telling him quietly what had happened at table 9, Brent asked one question. "What's the name on the reservation?" "Corrigan," Jessie said, "party of 4. Brent walked to the host stand and pulled up the account. He scrolled past the booking details, past the seating preference, past the wine note, and there, flagged in the ownership group's internal system, was the entry that had been there since the restaurant opened. Joan Corrigan, silent partner, founding investor, notify GM if present. He stood at that podium for a moment the way a man stands when the floor shifts under him and he has to recalibrate. Then he straightened his jacket. He asked Jessie to bring 2 glasses of the Taitinger they kept off the menu for certain occasions, and he walked toward table 9. I saw him before Joan did. Something in the way the room adjusted, servers stepping back, the hostess straightening up, a particular quality of attention suddenly directed at our corner. I've done enough site work to know when someone with real authority walks onto a floor. He stopped at the head of our table. He wasn't looking at Petra. He wasn't looking at Lucas. He was looking at my wife. "Mrs. Corrigan," he said, "it's an honor to welcome you back. I'm Brent Halliday, General Manager. I've been hoping to introduce myself properly for longer than you know." Joan looked up, a little confused, the way you look when someone uses your name and you're not sure why. "Brent, everything's been lovely, thank you." "I'm glad to hear it." His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, a quality I recognized in men who'd been carrying something for a long time and finally had permission to set it down. "I wanted to let you know personally, the ownership restructuring finalized this month. You're now the majority partner on this location, the other 2 sites as well." The table went still. Not the polite stillness of a restaurant at a good moment, the specific stillness of air that's been punched out of a room. I watched it happen. I watched Petra's fork stop midway to her mouth. I watched Lucas blink 3 times in quick succession like his brain was trying to reboot. I watched Joan sit with the information the way she sits with most things, quietly, taking stock, deciding how much of herself to give to the moment. I'm sorry, Petra said. Her voice had changed, something had gone out of it. Majority. What does that? Brent looked at her for the first time, professionally, evenly. Mrs. Corrigan is a founding investor in this restaurant group, he said. She's owned a stake in this location since before we opened. 3 locations as of this month, with the restructuring complete. Lucas said very quietly, Mum. Joan looked at her son. She picked up her wine glass and set it down again, carefully, the way she does when she's deciding how much to say. I've had a small interest in this group for a few years, she said. I don't usually bring it up. I don't like being treated differently because of where my money happens to be. She glanced at Petra when she said it. Just briefly, the way you glance at something you've already decided you're not going to waste a full look on. Lucas had gone pale in a specific way I'd only seen once before. The night he was 17 and called me from a parking lot to say he'd dented someone's car and wasn't sure what to do. The look of a person who has just understood that the thing they thought was a private problem is actually a public one, and has been the whole time. Mum, he said again, you own... I have a stake in it, Joan said. I've said that. Brent turned back to Petra, and his voice had the particular quality of a man being exceedingly professional because he has chosen to be, not because the situation requires it of him. I understand there was some confusion about this evening's check, he said. I'll be handling that personally. Petra straightened in her chair. She was making calculations behind her eyes and arriving at a number she didn't like. That's not necessary. It's a family matter. We'll sort it amongst ourselves. With respect, Brent said, you made it a front-of-house matter the moment you said it in front of my staff. He glanced at Jexie, standing near the server station. Jessie heard it. So did the table beside you. So did I by the time it reached my office. He let that sit for a moment. Then he said the sentence that made their faces change color. He said it quietly, without particular drama, the way you say something when you've been waiting 2 years to say it and have used all that time to get the words exactly right. Given that Mrs. Corrigan is the majority owner of this establishment, Brent said, looking at Petra directly, I'm afraid it's actually the 2 of you who will not be paying for anything here going forward. Because you're no longer welcome at this location, or at either of our other 2, effective tonight. I'll have the host note that in the reservation system. The silence that followed was the kind I will remember for the rest of my life. Petra's mouth opened, opened again. You cannot be serious. She was trying to find the register she usually used, the one that expected to be taken seriously, and it kept slipping. We are paying customers. You cannot just. You have every right to dine at most of the fine establishments in this city, Brent said. His voice had not changed volume or temperature by a single degree. Just not these 3. I'll make sure the note is accurate so there's no further confusion. He looked at Lucas then. Lucas was looking at Joan. Say something, Petra said to him sharply, in the tone that told me this wasn't the first time she'd used those exact words in that exact tone. But Lucas wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at his mother, and for the first time in what felt like a very long time, he looked like a person who was actually present in the room he was sitting in. Mum, he said. I should have at the table when she said it. I should have said something. Joan looked at her son for a moment, the way she used to look at him when he was a boy who'd done something that needed sitting with, not exploding at. You should have, she said. But that's a conversation for another time. She turned back to Brent and something passed between them. Recognition, I think, of a particular kind. The kind between people who've been connected without knowing it. Thank you, Brent, she said, for this evening, and for everything else. Something moved across his face. He nodded once, slowly, like a man who'd just received something he'd been waiting a long time to be allowed to receive. The honor is mine, Mrs. Corrigan, he said. Dinner is on the house tonight, for you and your husband. A brief pause. I'll have Jessie bring dessert. Petra stood up. Her chair scraped loud against the hardwood. This is completely unhinged, she said, loudly enough that both nearby tables went fully quiet. Over one comment at the check? You're banning us over one comment? Brent didn't blink. In 20 years in this industry, he said, I've heard most versions of that sentence. The one about not paying for her. It's never once been a single comment. It's never once been nothing. He excused himself. He stopped at the server station and said, loud enough for the section to hear, Jessie, Dessert for Mr. and Mrs. Corrigan on the house, and please box anything remaining for the young couple. A glance toward Lucas and Petra. They'll be heading out. Petra gathered her things. She said something to Lucas, hissed it, really too low for me to catch. Lucas stood. He looked at Joan one more time with an expression I knew, a man trying to decide if there was anything he could say that would be enough, and landing on the answer that there wasn't. Not yet. They left without paying for their own meals either. As it turned out, being asked to leave doesn't cancel the bill you already ran up, and Brent's assistant met them at the coat check with a printed copy of the evening's charges and a very composed smile. I only know this because I watched through the window as Petra read through it and went, if anything, a shade paler than she'd been at the table. Joan didn't watch them go. She sat with her hands folded and looked at the candle. Then she looked at me. "You okay?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "I think so. I'm just tired, Ted, not from tonight. I'm tired from the whole of the last few years." "You could have said something at the table," I told her, when she said it. "I know." Joan shook her head slowly. "But then it would have been about me reacting. This way it was about the truth. The truth doesn't need defending, it just needs to show up. That's my wife, 31 years worth of smarter than me, and I've never once resented her for it." Brent sat with us for a few minutes while the restaurant hummed around us and told us the story I've already told you, about Lily's prosthetic, about the letter, about 2 years of calling the foundation and being told it was anonymous and permanent. "I never stopped wanting to say thank you," he said. "I used to think I'd never get the chance, and then tonight." He stopped, exhaled. "I'm sorry it came attached to what happened at the table, but I want you to know, everyone in that kitchen has worked for you, in a way, for 4 years. They just didn't know it." Joan reached across the table and put her hand on his for a moment. "Lily's doing well?" she asked. Brent smiled like a man who doesn't get asked that question enough by people who actually mean it. "She plays hockey," he said. "Adam B League. She's terrible at it and she absolutely loves it." Joan laughed, a real one, the kind I hadn't heard all evening. Lucas called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. He called again that afternoon and Joan picked up. I sat on the back deck while she talked, the May light going soft over the yard. "I should have said something, Mum. Right there when she said it. I don't know why I didn't." Joan's voice was steady through the screen door. "You've known Petra for 4 years, Lucas. You've sat at dinners with us for 4 years. This wasn't the first time she's been the way she was tonight. You've been choosing not to notice for a long time." "I know." "I love you," Joan said, and she meant it completely. There was not a single qualifier in it. "Call me when you've had some time to think, not about apologizing, about what you actually want your life to look like." She hung up. She came out to the back deck and sat in the other chair, and we stayed quiet for a while. "You want me to say something useful?" I asked eventually. "I want you to let me just be in this for a minute," she said. So I did. Petra never called. Carol called instead, from Victoria, where she'd moved after retirement, and laughed so hard at the coat check story that she had to set down her tea. "I told you," she said to Joan. "I told you to keep your eyes open." She then told us, in the way only Carol can tell things, that she'd heard through their cousin in Kelowna that Petra had described the evening to her family as an ambush, and was considering whether the restaurant group could face some kind of action for discrimination. Carol's exact words about that were, "Oh, good Lord." Petra did attempt to book at one of the group's other locations a few weeks later, under a name close enough to her own that the system caught it when the credit card cleared. She was quietly, professionally asked to collect her coat. Carol heard that story too. She brought it up at Thanksgiving like it was a gift she'd been saving all autumn. Lucas started coming by the house alone, not every week but regularly. He'd show up on Saturdays and help me with whatever maintenance job I had on the go, and he'd eat lunch with Joan in the kitchen afterward. He didn't bring Petra's name up, neither did we. He came alone at Christmas that first year. Joan set one fewer place at the table and didn't say a word about it. She made butter tarts. She let Lucas eat 3. When he hugged her at the door to leave, he held on a few seconds longer than usual, and she let him. After he left, we washed the dishes together in the quiet that comfortable marriages live in, and somewhere near the end of the pots, Joan said, "It's going to take him a while to figure out what he actually wants." "I know," I said. "I'm going to have to be patient." "You're the most patient person I've ever met," I told her. "That's not going to be the hard part." She handed me the last pot. "No," she said. The hard part is watching him make the wrong choices for another year or two before he figures it out. She was right, she usually is. The second encounter happened at a superstore the following spring, of all places. We were in the cereal aisle, debating fiber content, when I heard a voice I recognized say, "Joan." "Oh wow, hi," with the specific brightness of someone who's been rehearsing a conversation in the car on the way over, and is hoping they don't have to use it. Petra alone, cart half full, wearing a smile that hadn't quite reached her eyes. Joan turned around and said her name the way you say the name of someone you've processed fully, and arrived at a calm, final position on. "Petra. It's so good to run into you. I've been meaning to reach out. I just wasn't sure after everything." "You have my number," Joan said pleasantly. "You've had it since the wedding." Petra's smile held but wobbled slightly at the edges. "I know. I think there was a misunderstanding that night. I was under a lot of pressure with work and I didn't mean for it to." "I don't think there was a misunderstanding," Joan said. She placed a box of oatmeal in the cart without taking her eyes off Petra. "You told a 23-year-old server, in front of everyone at that table, that you weren't covering my meal. At my own Mother's Day dinner, I was sitting right there. I know how it sounds, but you have to understand." "I do understand," Joan said. "People have hard seasons. I've had plenty of my own. But I've never, in 31 years of marriage or 30 years of working with children, had it difficult enough that I needed to tell someone not to feed my mother-in-law." Petra's expression tightened. "So that's it? One mistake and I'm just out? That doesn't seem fair." Joan tilted her head slightly. "It's a thing she does when she's decided something but is giving you one last moment to catch up on your own. Fairness became very urgent to you," she said, "once you were on the receiving end of it." She pushed the cart forward. I fell into step beside her. We didn't look back. I heard later, through Lucas, that Petra sat in her car in that parking lot for 20 minutes afterward. I don't know what she did with that time. I hope it was useful. A year to the month after that Mother's Day, Joan and I went back to the restaurant on 17th Avenue. Just the two of us. Same corner table by the window. Brent brought the Tatinger himself and sat with us for a few minutes before the dinner rush. He told us Lily had scored her first hockey goal of the season and had described it in enough detail that the whole family still talked about it at dinner. Joan toasted to Lily, Brent toasted to Joan. Lucas joined us for Easter that year. He didn't say much about Petra, and we didn't ask. There was something different about him, something settled, like a man who'd stopped performing a version of himself and had started simply being in the room. He helped me carry the folding chairs up from the garage. He ate 2 butter tarts and told Joan, unprompted, that there was nothing on earth that tasted like them. He didn't need to say anything else. Some things get said in the simple work of showing up. That's something Joan taught me over 31 years of watching her be exactly who she is, quietly, thoroughly, without asking anyone to notice. She didn't start waiting for credit when she helped Brent's family. She didn't hold back a kindness because no one was watching. She's just been the person she's always been, in rooms where it costs her and in rooms where it doesn't. And the world has a way of remembering that, even when she doesn't think to. Petra spent 1 minute deciding who was worth a plate of duck. She never understood that the woman she'd written off was already in the room, already at the table, already holding more of it than Petra ever thought to ask about. She got her answer anyway. Not from a scene, not from a speech, not from me losing my temper in a restaurant on a Sunday evening in May. Just the truth walking in on its own terms. The way Joan always does everything.